Good morning, class 8, and welcome to your social science class. So, today we already had a class which was a live class during the second period, and during that time we discussed the question paper of your half yearly. And I also told you that today during the recorded class, I am going to start with the fifth chapter from your geography textbook, and the name of the chapter is Agriculture. So, the topics that we are going to cover in today's discussion are number one, economic activities, and number two, the types of economic activities. Now, let us have a look at the learning outcome of today. So, after completing today's class, you all will be in a position to first of all define economic activities. You will know what exactly economic activities are. Then, you will be able to identify and also classify all the economic activities. And lastly, you are going to understand and analyze as to why agriculture or farming is considered to be a primary activity of the people. All right, so without wasting much time, let us begin with today's class. But before directly going to the explanation of all these topics today, let me quickly show you some pictures and you all try to recognize them. All right. So here is the first picture. So what is this picture showing? What comes to your mind when you see this picture? Here are some farmers and they are all in an agricultural farm, isn't it? Let's go to the next picture. What do you think this picture represents? Well, this picture represents a teacher teaching her class. This is the third picture. What do you see here? Here we see people working in an industry. This seems to be like a steel industry, isn't it? Then here we can see people who are engaged in fishing, isn't it? And here we can see a market, especially we can see a supermarket or a departmental store, you can say, just like Big Bazaar, isn't it? So what does all this picture tell you? Well, all these pictures are nothing but they are only called as economic activities, isn't it? So activities that generate income. Generate income means the activities through which you can earn money. They are called as economic activities. Again, those activities which are related to earning livelihood, the activities with which you are able to live your life, you are able to fulfill all your needs, they are called as economic activities. So what are economic activities? Economic activities are those activities which people are engaged in order to, number one, get money, and number two, to earn their livelihood. Livelihood means to live a life, to live with all the basic necessities of life. All right, so this is economic activity, and all the pictures that I have shown you today, these are all economic activities. For example, you saw people working in the steel industry, in the factory. What are they doing? They are working, but for what? They are working for generating income, for getting money, so that they can live their life in a proper manner. Similarly, all the activities that you saw, fishing, farming, then the market, everything, these are all categorized into various economic activities. So when I told you about categorization of economic activities, then I mean that there are three main types of economic activities. Number one is primary activity. Number two is secondary activity. And lastly, we have a third sector or a third kind of activity, which is known as the tertiary activity. So all the economic activities, all the activities that people are engaged in order to get money, in order to generate income, in order to earn their livelihood, they are categorized into three kinds of activities: primary, secondary, and tertiary. So now, quickly, let us have a look and let us try to understand the various types of economic activities. So, the transformation from a plant to a finished products involves three types of economic activities: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Transformation from a plant means the change of anything from the raw material to the finished product. It involves three kind of activities. All right, let me give you an example here. For example, you all can see packed wheat. Yes or no? For example, Ashirwad Atta. Now, that Ashirwad Atta is the finished product that you purchase from the market. But where do you get this atta from, or where do you get this wheat from? You get it from the farmers who produce these crops, the grains, the wheat grains, isn't it? So you buy a finished product from the market, but actually that finished product, it comes from a lot of steps. There are lots of steps involved in making a product, and all these steps include all the three kinds of economic activities: primary, secondary, and tertiary. So now let us try to understand what exactly is primary activities. So primary activities are those which include the extraction and production of natural resources. So when we extract something from nature, when we try to produce something in nature, that is called the primary activities. For example, agriculture. We are trying to grow a crop. You do not get rice directly. You have to grow the seeds, isn't it? You don't get wheat directly. You need to sow the seeds again. You have to look after it. You have to do proper farming. Lots of inputs and output processes are there. Only then you will be able to produce it, isn't it? So agriculture is a primary activity. Fishing, gathering, these all comes under primary activity. These are the activities which people get by direct contact with nature. Next comes secondary activities. Secondary activities involve the processing of these resources. These resources means the natural resources, or the things, the resources which people grow in the primary activity. For example, manufacturing of steel, baking of bread, weaving of a cloth. So how do you weave a cloth? You weave a cloth, for example, with the help of cotton thread. So where do you get that thread from? That thread comes from the cotton plant. So when you use that cotton plant, which is grown by a farmer, when you use that, when you process that and try to make a finished product out of it, that is known as secondary activities. Then the third kind of an activity is the tertiary activity. It provides support to the primary and secondary sector. For example, transport, trade, banking, insurance, and advertising. The people who are engaged in the tertiary activities, they are also said to be involved in the service sector activities. People who gives us service, they are called as the tertiary sector activities. Now I showed you the picture of a teacher. The teacher was giving service. How? By imparting knowledge. I showed that a farmer was in the field plowing his land. What does it show? It shows that he is trying to do a primary activity. He's trying to grow something naturally. Isn't it? I showed you the people who were in the steel industry. What were they doing? They were in the manufacturing sector. Isn't it? So these are the various types of economic activities. The primary, which is involved in growing natural resources, secondary activities which are involved in processing the resources, and lastly the tertiary sector or the tertiary activity which provides support to the primary and secondary sectors by giving service to the people. All right, so these are the various types of economic activities. Now, you all are already told that agriculture is a primary sector activity. So why is it so? In fact, the entire chapter that we are going to discuss hereafter is about agriculture. So what makes agriculture so important that it is termed as primary? So before going to that, let us try to understand the derivative meaning of agriculture. So this word agriculture is derived from a Latin word, from the Latin language, ager or agri, which means soil and culture. which ultimately goes to means cultivation. So that culture which involves soil, that is known as cultivation or agriculture. So agriculture as a primary activity includes growing of crops, fruits, vegetables, flowers, and also remember students, rearing of livestock, rearing of animals which are useful for us. These all comes under the primary activity. And the agriculture farming is said to be a primary sector activity because more than half of the population of the world, not of India only, but of the world, are engaged in agricultural activity. Most of the people, they are engaged in agriculture. That is why agriculture is termed as a primary activity. And if you talk about India, then more than 60% of the population of India is still dependent on agriculture. And that is why perhaps India is said to be a agrarian country. More than two-thirds of India's population is dependent on agriculture. So these are the reasons as to why agriculture falls under the most important sector of the country's economy or of the world economy, and that is primary sector. Now let us see what are the various factors which makes agricultural activity very favorable. First of all, there should be favorable topography of soil and climate. There should be proper soil, proper climate, and then only there will be proper agricultural growth. And lastly, the land on which the crops are being grown, those needs to be arable. Arable means those needs to be fertile. Those should be suited for growing particular kinds of crops. For example, in Assam, we grow tea. So why do you grow tea in Assam? It is because the soil and the climate of Assam is such that it suits the plantation of tea here. Okay, so for agricultural products to be successfully grown, we need first of all proper soil and proper climate, and then we need a fertile land. Clear? All right. So all this while we were talking about agriculture. Apart from agriculture, there are also many other kinds of cultures. Agriculture we already know. It means growing of crops, rearing livestock, etc. Then we have sericulture, pisciculture, viticulture and horticulture. Sericulture is the rearing of silkworms and silk production like people do in Swalkusi, isn't it? Pisciculture means breeding of fish. Like people have fishery, they breed fish, they sell it. This is called pisciculture. Viticulture, it is the cultivation of grapes. And then comes horticulture, growing of flowers, fruits and vegetables. So these are the various kinds of cultures which form under the larger area of primary activities. Agriculture, sericulture, pisciculture, viticulture and horticulture. And nowadays there are many different kind of agricultures still being introduced by people largely. So students, now let us try to answer few questions. First of all, agriculture falls under the tertiary sector. Is this statement correct? Well, if you have listened to my explanation well and if you have gone through the PPT well, then I'm sure you can find out the mistake here. The mistake here is tertiary sector. Agriculture falls under the primary sector. Why? Because first of all, more than 50% of the world population is dependent on agriculture. And secondly, because in India also more than 60% of the people are dependent in agriculture. Next question. Assam is famous for tea cultivation. Why? I already gave you the answer before. Because of the suitable topography of climate and soil. Isn't it? And lastly, question number 3, I leave it for you. Why is agriculture not considered as a secondary sector activity? Why do we call it to be a part of the primary sector activity? That you need to think for yourself. Read whatever I have taught you today. Listen to the explanation once again and write it on your own. So these 3 questions are your homework. And I hope that you all go through the PPT, which I'll be sharing with you all shortly. Go through it. Go through the book. And if you have any doubt, then during our live class, we will discuss about it. Okay, so that's all for today, dear students. Thank you so much. Do your homework properly, submit it in Google Classroom. And of course, the last day for submitting your homework is Friday. Clear? All right. So that's all, students. Thank you.